As promised, I have the top recruiting reporter on the grounds at University of Virginia. My homegirl, Jacquie Franciulli, is in the building. She's going to bless us with some information on what's going on with the University of Virginia's transfer portal, recruiting endeavors, and also what's going on in the future. This is Locked On Virginia.
You are Locked On Virginia, your daily podcast on the Virginia Cavaliers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good day, viewers and listeners. I'm your host, Big Lawrence Johnson, and welcome to the Locked On Virginia Cavaliers podcast, your first place to come to get your Wahoo Fix every day as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And as you can see, the day is, as I said, Friday the 13th. We could have some spooky things going on right now, but we have our number one officer on the grounds, reporter Jacquie Franciulli from 247 Sports. How you doing today, Jacquie?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. And we're about to jump into some things here, but let me give you guys our title sponsor. Our title sponsor today is BetOnline. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, yes, Jacquie Franciulli is, like I said, the foremost reporter to come to when we're talking about what's going on the grounds at the University of Virginia. And we're going to bless you guys with information on the transfer portal, the latest or whatever there is left. And then we'll talk about some high school recruiting and where the University of Virginia sits right now. Then we'll talk about what's coming up down the road for the university, maybe getting towards the spring game. Because think about it, everyone. The spring game is only, what are we at, a month, 2 months away? Actually, spring practice.
In April, yeah, mid-April.
Right? Yeah, so
Yeah, spring practice will be
is
towards the end of February, yeah.
so we got to get this ball rolling. So, but how's everything going, Jacquie, on this beautiful Friday for you?
Oh, it's busy. Contact period is back, so coaches are on the road checking in into recruits. So they can have in-home visits with 2023 recruits and any transfer targets, but they also can visit some high schools and start kind of evaluating and take a lead on that 24-25 class, which is an opportunity they didn't have last year. Because remember, last year they came in kind of late into the cycle and they were busy trying to secure their class. So because of that, they weren't able to really recruit further along in the future. Now they can. So you'll see them really put an emphasis on recruiting 24s and 25s.
Mm-hmm. And I see your trophies in the back. You're an award-winning reporter, correct, Jacquie? I mean, I know you're modest, but let everybody know the truth about you.
Yeah. So actually, these are mine, and that's actually my husband. So we both worked in local television for a while. That's how we both met. So he's an award-winning journalist himself. So we kind of put him all over here.
Like the Wonder Twins activate or something, right? You guys got it going on. Yeah, so what we got going on? We're going to talk about the transfer portal. Of course, that has been kind of a whirlwind for the University of Virginia. It was kind of down. Some people were down on the quarterback pick, but then once they kind of looked at the tape and maybe they feel a little better about it. And then, of course, it was down until you had a recruit from Clemson come in. You had Kobe Pace. You had Deshaun Parker. You also had the Northwestern receiver come in. And I guess right now we lost Deshaun Parker. And now we're bringing in another lineman. So kind of give me the state of the union on the transfer portal.
Right. So right now, as of this morning, they've enrolled a few of them, actually. Tony Muskett is already on grounds. Malik Washington is also on grounds. So you've got two transfers that have arrived. And also, obviously, defensive back Cameron Kelly is also on grounds. So those three transfers have made it on grounds. Deshaun Parker was meant to be one of these guys who signed. Obviously, you said he's head to Iowa. And then Ugana Nana, he's a mid-year enrollee as well. He's not signed up yet, but he committed this week. So again, they can enroll until the last day where you can cut and add classes. So he's got a few days. Obviously, the first day of class is only on January 18th, but most of the guys who are early enrolling were meant to be on grounds today, on Friday. So you've got those guys there. Now, Virginia is still being busy because, like Tony Elliott said in his early signing day press conference, they still need to bolster their secondary and they still needs to bolster their trenches because they're down on the O-line, especially because they lost not only guys to the transfer portal, but guys like Jonathan Leach and Derek Devine are no longer playing football. They're transitioning away from football, if I use Tony Elliott's words. So right now, Elliott would like to have 15 guys, but with Dejon Parker leaving and then Nana committing, they're still only to 12. So they would like to add 3 more if possible. Now, originally, a lot more emphasis was placed on the portal, but as I've been talking to people within the program or around them, I'm hearing that they are still looking at high school prospects as well, and they just offered a high school prospect. Let me make sure I have his name. Jamison Mejia. He's a 23 offensive tackle out of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. He was offered by Virginia this week. And actually, Virginia is visiting him today for the first day of the contact period. So they're working on securing him for an official visit. They're also after another offensive line that's committed to another program. So they're still evaluating high school guys. So they're not committed to just portal guys. Because at the end of the day, if you go into the portal, if you're an offensive lineman and you're good, a lot of programs are going to go after you. And the way it works right now is if you're a good O lineman and if Alabama's going to look after you, Georgia's going to look, those big programs are going to be the programs that go after. We saw it with Virginia's offensive linemen. When they entered the portal, they went to Michigan, they went to USC. So you're seeing that as well when UVA is trying to go for linemen that would have initial impact, really going into the starting lineup. That's who they want, more experienced guys. It's a little bit harder to navigate the transfer portal when it comes to those O linemen, because if you're any good, the big guys want you. Because like Tony Elliott said, like we've always said, you win football games in the trenches, and every single program is always hunting for more big body guys in the trenches. I think
rare.
They're rare. And it's just like if you're a quarterback or O lineman or D lineman, you're going to be very popular in a transfer portal. That's been kind of the lessons that we've learned in the first couple of years of this portal. So Virginia is still looking for those, I guess, X factor guys, and they're still looking to bolster that secondary. Again, it's going to be a mix of looking at the portal, possibly looking at high school athletes. They're involved with Tavon Kyle. As of Friday, 4:23 p.m., he hasn't made his decision yet. Again, another mid-year enrollee. He was down to UVA ECU. ECU's coach left for Louisville, and now he's down to UVA Purdue. So it's a tight recruitment there. So we're just gonna have to wait and see on him. But again, looking at O-line and at the secondary.
Secondary, of course. The news, I hadn't reported about it yet, but Camp Kelly, 757 guy from where I'm from, where I'm at actually, coming up and committing to the University of Virginia. And it's interesting, that he would choose the University of Virginia, coming from the University of North Carolina. Have you heard any other words come out of his camp as far as, why he chose Virginia and, because he was an all ACC player a year or so ago. So anything come up with Cameron Kelly and why he chose University of Virginia?
No, he kind of kept a little quiet after his decision. He was pretty open about when he was visiting, but then he decided to kind of stay close to home and stick with family before he prepared to go to Virginia. A lot of these guys who enter the portal and have, an extra year or two of eligibility honestly just want to go home. That's been pretty much the dominant thing is if you're going to go home, go to a program that you can develop, raise your stock a little bit for the NFL, but also get to play in front of your family. So this is an opportunity for Cam Kelly, not only to get to a program that you can see some development, especially with Anthony Johnson going to the NFL Combine and seeing with Ventrell Stripers, who went into the transfer portal and was one of the most heavily recruited guys into the transfer portal because of the development that he had with Coach Rudd and Coach Cox. You have that, but he gets to play close to home now. So that was obviously a big thing. And honestly, I mean, I wasn't here to covering Virginia during Cam Kelly's recruitment, but from what I hear, Virginia was a school that was heavily involved up until the last minute. So it doesn't surprise me that he would go to a school that he was familiar with. Because again, one thing in the transport that we have discovered is a lot of these kids already know where they're going, not just because of stuff that's going on behind the scenes, but also because they've had previous connections with staffs or with schools. So if they visited a school, like for example, Tavon Kyle, who's choosing to UVA and Purdue, might not have visited Purdue recently or visited the new
Mm-hmm.
staff, but he was once a Purdue commit. So he knows the program. He knows he's visited the program previously. So a lot of that is big factors when it comes.
Tavon Kyle, where's he from? Exactly. Like,
He's right now he is from he's Iowa State cornerback transfer, but he's from the state of Georgia.
okay, all right. So that is a very interesting nugget about Tavon Kyle, and as we were just talking about Cam Kelly, I mean, at University of North Carolina, he played kind of a hybrid safety kind of a position. Of course, I guess having the ability or the opportunity to play cornerback because UVA is light on cornerbacks right now. I would imagine maybe he's going to try to bump out and start playing cornerback almost exclusively at the University of Virginia. Is that your idea of him coming to Virginia as
Yeah.
well? There's staff
I mean,
snaps
they need
available at
numbers.
corner.
I mean,
Yeah.
they need numbers at corner. That's no question about it. And they're pretty. They have a veteran lineup at safety. I mean, look at who they're returning. They're returning almost everybody there. They're Eunice Sanker, Antonio Clary, Cohen King's coming back for his extra year of eligibility. I mean, Langston Long. Although I would personally like to see him move at linebacker. I think he's got the body and the frame to possibly move at linebacker. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he's back at safety as well. So they have a lot of options at that position, while at corner they're a little depleted and they want more experience in there. So I can see him starting at corner. Now, does it mean that he won't move to safety? Maybe. We'll see how spring goes. That's why you want these guys to come in spring so you can kind of play around and see what position fits them best.
Yeah, and then of course the uprising of Fentrell Cypress, just a meteoric rise for him and being so popular right now. I think that was attractive to Cameron as well. So, but it's speaking of meteoric rises, let's talk about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every personal and amateur league out there, from football to college bowl season, basketball, and World Cup. We've even got it all at betonline.net. If you love sportscast and podcasting, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to find a way to get the betting info you need. Head to the website today or get it on your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline.net, where the game starts. So now that we've kind of talked about the transfer portal and kind of where UVA sits right now, uh, let's high school recruiting, and that's the real lifeblood of your program. That's where a lot of people judge you by. We just saw Georgia just mow through TCU, and a lot of that is because of all the hard work that Kirby Smart's recruiting coaches did, um, for the past 5 years, 6 years since he's been there. These 4 and 5 stars on top of 4 and 5 stars, and you can just see, what can come about if you recruit. It's almost like he's followed the Alabama blueprint, to become like Alabama East, So what have you found out about the high school recruiting or the recruiting roundup right now?
Sure. Yeah. So what Georgia has shown is that the transfer portal is not your answer to continuing success. Transfer portal is your chance to fill in holes of the roster, but it's not your ability to create a program or to build a program. To build it, you need to build a program by going through your high school ranks. That's your bloodline of your program. So Virginia is on the road, like I mentioned. Des Kitchings was on to see a 2023 offensive lineman, but the other coaches are looking at 24s, 25s. A lot of them are staying in state today because there's a junior day on Saturday. They're having 2 junior days this month. One this Saturday on the 14th, happening on the 28th. So that's when a lot of programs. So this weekend they're competing with Penn State, and Penn State once again is attacking Virginia pretty hard, and they're hosting a lot of these in-state guys, including a four-star wide receiver Chance Wiggins. A lot of guys are at the top 24/7 linebacker Chris Jones. Those guys are heading to Penn State. But Virginia is hosting a number of guys. UVA Legacy Zaire Rayner, he had a Trinity Episcopal. He's going to be in town. You're going to have guys like four-star linebacker out of Maryland. He's going to be in town. So there's going to be several guys. There's probably about a dozen crucial big guys that you want to be involved with early, like Fun Springs quarterback Christian Martin. He's also going to be on the grounds. Again, a lot of good visitors for this Saturday junior day. This is the type of thing what they need to do to get these guys on grounds, get them as much as possible, and try to seal the deal as early as you can. A guy like Christian Martin is when you pinpoint and say, like, we can build a class around you. We can build a program around you. Let's get you committed early. He's going to visit Virginia Tech on the 28th because Virginia Tech does not have a junior day this week. They have one on the 23rd and 8th. They'll have 2 weekends of junior days as well. So they're competing with Virginia Tech on who's getting these in-state visitors. So again, this is when you start seeing all that work pay off. Like I said also earlier, last year they didn't have a chance to kind of go through and attack 23 and 24s because they're so busy trying to secure 2022 linemen. This year they've secured most of their class. They're trying to fill in a couple hosts here and there, but they don't have to devote the whole staff to that. And also last year, the whole staff wasn't even together at this point. Granted, the whole staff is not together right now, but they should be here relatively soon. And with that, they're able to attack 24 and 25, and then hopefully they won't be behind the 8 ball down the line because that's a lot of the things that they were going in is they were going in and going after a kid, and then the coach would tell them, "Sorry, we've he's already talked to Penn State for a year already, or they talked to Virginia Tech. Brent Pry recruited him in Penn State, and now he's over here. That's got a tight relationship. So again, having at least a year underneath your belt recruiting these guys and then getting it early, especially 25s. I know it's hard to think that you're still focusing on 24s, but you got to go start in 25s, and you might well go on 26 too. So that's how much they have to kind of work on this next few weeks. And I'm curious to see what type of changes you'll see in Virginia's recruiting approach. Right now, I don't see much as change as far as offers. If you've noticed, Virginia doesn't extend many offers. They kind of have a set system of how they do it. They don't cast a wide net of offers. They go, these are our first line of, I guess, these are our first guys. These are, I guess, team A. And then they go team B, and then they go C. And there's always like a bullpen of waiting of guys that they would say, like, hey, these are the next guys that they would offer. So right now they have the first group of offers. So I'm curious to see if they change that style, because that's more of a Clemson style. I'm curious to see.
It's more methodical.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if Virginia changes that routine or it changes that process. I would say they've lost a few kids because they don't offer quick enough. So I'm curious to see if they adapt to that. Like, I get what they're trying to do is trying to make a Virginia offer more appealing, because it's like, I landed this Virginia offer, but at the same time telling the kid, this is your offer. It's committable. We want you. We're not offering the guy after you. We're offering you because we want you. So I get it. I get the process and what it stands for. But in this day and age in college football, like, I don't know if Virginia could afford to do that compared to, like a Clemson who can't afford to do that. I mean, I've covered the SEC, and Clemson would go after Florida and come in late and still be a force to be reckoned with against Alabama, Georgia's, and Florida's because of Clemson's winning tradition the last few years. Virginia doesn't have that kind of backing in. So when you coming in and you have other schools already there, like Duke does a good job of offering early. So does Maryland. So does Pitt. So does Wake Forest. Those are the schools that you're competing with. The only school that doesn't come in and recruit early is a team like Stanford, but that's just a whole nother can of worms because they have admissions and they cannot offer a kid until they've got through the admissions process, and admissions give them a green light. So that's a whole different story when it comes to Stanford. So again, I don't know how this is going to work for them. And now this is the year I've been telling everybody this. I'm giving the 2023 class they did a good job closing, and I'm not going to evaluate how they did it because that was a new year. It was a new head coach, first year head coach, new staff, trying to figure out what's what, and also starting late. 24-25 is where you really see how the staff is approaching recruiting. Are they doing enough? What needs to change? Are they adapting and adjusting quick enough so that they can have success on the trail?
Question. So I guess just getting back to the portal really quick, if you had to give the portal a grade, what would you give them on a grade for the transfer portal? They did get a couple 4-stars, which is, very interesting to get.
I give him a solid B. I give him a solid B. I think the transfer portal, it's hard to grade you, Virginia, when it comes to the transfer portal. And I think people have heard my spiel a lot about transfers are not the answer for Virginia because it's so hard to get them admitted into into the university, because if you're grad transfer, you needed to be your graduate school to accept you. And if you're an
Credit's got to
undergrad, you
match.
gotta credit's gotta match. It's not about GPA. Someone could come here with a perfect GPA and still not get into Virginia. You're talking about kids from Dartmouth, UGA, to like Georgetown, to Harvard, to Yale. Those schools, you would think it's an automatic win for Virginia, but I can tell you there was at least one Ivy League student that was not going to get into UVA because credits did not match. So
Was it a
that is
lineman?
what. Hmm?
Was it a
Yeah.
lineman?
So it
Was it the
was.
lineman? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the problem that Virginia is dealing
Mm.
with. So that's why, like, I'm grading it as the B, because honestly, it's tough to recruit the portal if you're Virginia. Not only are you dealing with that, you're also dealing with, tampering. I mean, it's
Yeah.
no secret that things are going on, and you're trying to do it the right way. But Tony Ellis talking about building a model program, so they're not going to tamper. They're not going to go behind the scenes. So until they do regulations like they do in English Premier League or La Liga, where they use transfer bans if you tamper before the transfer window opens, or a fine for the program, it's going to be hard for any school like Virginia to kind of work the portal. So you have that going on, but you also have like I just touched on, the high school process of offers. That same
Mm-hmm.
process goes with transfers too. So
Right.
you have an issue where, so there were times where the coach sometimes needed to go and see the prospect face to face before they give an offer. And I totally understand, you want to see the physique, you want to see his size, you want to see the character and see if it meshes. But these guys are getting offers from other coaches that are not doing that process. And then because the transfer portal moves so quickly, because they're trying to figure out where they're going to roll in January after only starting the process, weeks ahead of time, you get the issue of the offers and visits are sealed pretty quickly. You also have the problem that, a lot of these coaches on UVA staff weren't together, weren't recruiting these kids that were interested in UVA previously. It was the other staff. So you can't even call these kids that wanted to. Cameron Kelly's the exception, but usually you can't call the kids like, "Hey, we recruited you to Virginia before you're in the portal. Can we come back?" Actually, Devin Chandler, Marquise Higgins did that last year when in the transfer.
Mm.
He was a guy that Coach Higgins recruited heavily, and then
Mm-hmm.
Chandler chose Wisconsin. So when Coach Higgins saw Chandler go into the portal, Higgins communicated with him. It was a natural connection, natural relationship. Virginia doesn't have much of that right now, because these coaches, apart from just two of them, weren't here at Virginia the last few years. So even they don't have that. So that's why the Kobe paste from Tony Elliott was an
It's a big
interesting win,
deal.
because Tony Elliott did essentially what a lot of the other programs are doing. They're kind of going back to the Rolodex and saying, "Oh, we recruited you like 3 years ago. We have a relationship with you. Let's build on that again. You liked me before. We were in your top 5, top 3. So let's build
Mm-hmm.
on that relationship." So those are the things that Virginia kind of has to navigate in the system. And honestly, NIL, I know a lot of people talk about NIL in high school, but honestly, NIL in the transfer portal is much more prevalent than it is during your high school prospects. NIL is not moving the needle. I know this is probably going to irritate people, but I'm going to tell you, NIL is not about the 3-star guy and that UVA is going after. NIL does not affect most of the recruits that Virginia offers. I'm going to repeat that. NIL does not affect most Virginia recruits. Now in the portal, that's a different story. NIL is something that is discussed in the transfer portal. So when you look at NIL, the transfer portal is where it affects. Not saying the NIL doesn't affect. I mean, I'm just following the drama that's going on at University of Florida with the quarterback Rashada, but that's who the NIL is. Those 5-star guys. We're not talking about the 3-star guys that Virginia is battling. Will there be some things that might go behind the scenes? Sure, but NIL is not the deciding factor when it comes to high schoolers.
Well, you think about, these players that are, coming in from high school and what Virginia has to offer. It's almost like, the NIL, it really, for a school like Virginia, it almost decreased. I don't say decrease the value, but, if you're an athlete, student athlete, and sure, you want to play football, you want to get a great education, but the NIL really pulls away, I think, more athletes from a school like Virginia, where Virginia could really lean on, the type of degree you could get. You get a, education from University of Virginia. You can go anywhere, you can work anywhere, but when you give, a student athlete the offer of, especially a high end athlete, which is a lot of times what they're looking for, an NIL offer. You can give them, hey, we also are a great football program, and you can get a quality education. I think that hurts a school like a UVA where they really leaned on the educational side. So the landscape is changing for everyone. And I feel like
Yeah.
the wide net is the process I think that they need to cast as opposed to being very, like you said before, they're very calculated in
Yeah.
who they recruit. They need to kind of be a little bit more aggressive and say, you know what, we need to just put it out there to see who's listening.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I kind of wish they do cast a wider net. I actually agreed with that one thing that Bronco Mendenhall did in the recruiting landscape is they did cast a wide net. I think that was a
Mm-hmm.
good strategy for them, especially how they handled it. He didn't focus much in state, which is a shame. I think they should have done that, but I also like the fact that he did recruit nationally. I think UVA
Mm-hmm.
is a program that they should recruit nationally. It's academically, you should recruit the prep schools in the area. You should go back to Florida, go to Gulliver Prep. Those are the type of
They've
schools
done
that you
well.
need to recruit.
Mm-hmm.
St. Thomas Aquinas. Again, those are the programs you need to go. I would go further because right now, like, yes, St. Thomas Aquinas was the reason why they went in there is because Terry Kirby's son played there. So obviously there's a UVA connection there. And obviously Gulliver Preps, the head coach, is also a Virginia alum and former Virginia player. So yes, there's a couple of Virginia connections there, but I say go further into other private schools, go back to Kentucky, see what Xavier Brown's former high school is doing because they're obviously a state contender almost every year. Try to get into those private schools. And again, those are type of schools that have that model kid that usually you kind of look, oh, that's a UVA kid. When you look at their profile, look at their, I guess their resume,
Bio.
you call your
Right.
bio, and you go like, that is a UVA kid. The one thing is, I think the NIL is going to kind of balance itself out, though. I think because you're seeing it play right now. University of Florida is a prime example of what's going wrong with NIL. They're being held hostage about a situation with NIL, and you're going to see what Miami's too. It's becoming an issue where schools are not going to get wins here, and then you're going to get boosters who are going to say, how much I'm paying for this, or how, like, you got businesses who are saying, I'm sponsoring a kid from high school that hasn't played one down of football, and then you go
Mm-hmm.
into the depth chart and he's not in number 2 or even number 3 because he's not performing well in spring. Because come on, these are kids that haven't played one down college football. You don't know how they're going to handle the speed of the game. You don't know if they're going to fit the scheme properly. They might need a year or two to adjust because this is real life and things don't happen as quickly as they do in video games. So again, I think the NIL is going to balance itself out because I think you're seeing this exorbitant amount of money now. And to be fair, a lot of the stuff that you see in public was going on in years for college football. So you're just seeing what's
Yeah.
going on in public.
It's just
So
above the table now.
it's just above the table. So that's
Right.
why I'm saying a lot of times when people say NIL, I'm like, a lot of this stuff is just public now. Some of these great numbers that you hear and stuff, a lot of the more drama stuff, those are the things I'm saying, those are going to be balanced out in a few years because some of these kids are going to get this big bag up front and then realize that I'm not getting developed at this program. So I'm just going to get this money up front and then not be able to get to the NFL. But again, there's a lot of stuff that's going to balance itself out in 3-4 years. So you kind of just have to hang tight, figure out what works for your program, adjust as much as you can, and hopefully there's going to be some regulation. Obviously, you got to count on the NCAA to do anything, but hopefully there's some regulations there, and you just kind of adapt until that balance out. Because again, money isn't infinite. There's not a, there's what was
Right.
the limit does not exist, that gift from the Mean Girls.
Mm-hmm.
It does exist. There's a limit to how much money you can put out there and not see success. So like
Right.
Miami, like last year was a losing season. Are they going to pay every single year for Mario Cristobal to not have a winning season? Well, he needs to win this year with the players that don't got good NIL money. So again, there's a different level. So we're going to see things balance out here.
Also, we can't breaking any news or anything, but a lot of people you've seen some of the chat groups are upset because there's no offensive lineman. We actually lost a potential
Right.
starter because there's no offensive line coach. But there is news on the way. I know maybe you want to throw that out there for people to keep on your
Yeah. Well,
what is it called?
well, I've learned a lot lately where done deal is not a done deal until there's a public announcement. So I hate like I had my poor subscribers in between Christmas and New Year's. I got like two good sources telling me that they were on the verge of getting an announcement. They were on it, and then suddenly things fell through, and they did not. So right now things look good for one particular candidate. So
Mm-hmm.
we have not had an announcement. I keep checking my phone at Friday
Mm-hmm.
at 4:45 p.m. There has not been an announcement yet. So, but I expect things to run smoothly with this
Mm-hmm.
particular candidate. I don't see any problems as of right now.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully there will be one. And yeah, so the O-line coach is an issue when you have other programs go into a prospect's ear and say, "Do they tell you who the O-line coach is? Do they tell you who the O-line coach is? You only have a year
Yeah.
of you only have a year of eligibility, so you got to make sure you have the right O-line coach. You know your O-line coach is
Yeah.
here. You know what offense we're about to run here. You know we don't have a full rebuild job with a new offensive line coach. There's a lot that gets told to these prospects, and I get it. I mean, if I only have 1 year of eligibility, that's a different story. You need to know who your O-line coach is. But
Right.
I've covered recruiting for 10 years now, and I've seen kids commit without an offensive coordinator. I've seen kids commit without a defensive coordinator. So at the end of the day, it's more than just what's the position coach there at the end of the day.
Right. Right.
There's more reasons. So yes, that was probably a reason, but there's always more factors to it. Again, a kid commits to several programs. I mean, I've seen kids commit to a program without a head coach.
Right.
I
That's
mean,
right.
so it's again when recruiting, there's a lot. It's never one answer. That I'll just put it that there's never only one reason.
So make sure you subscribe to Jacquie's 247 platform there, so you can get the inside from her. And when that information does drop, she'll be able to share that with you. It's a really cool service. What are you running right now? Is it still 50% off? And you get was it Paramount, or what do you got going on?
No, actually, that one ended on January 2nd.
Okay.
So we
See,
are.
hey, I'm with it though.
Yes,
I'm
you
checking.
are. So we do have the first month is now $1, so you can go over there and check it out. We tend to run a couple of sales a year, but right now you can get that first month and do monthly, and then we usually have a couple of sales that once you're on monthly, we can upgrade to annual for a smaller fee than you would do for the annual. So again, this is going to be the time of year where, like, I mean, this morning I think I pumped up 4 stories within an hour and a half because
Wow.
coaches are on the road and home visits. There's going to be new 2023 targets going on. I will be at Fork Union on Monday. If you're familiar with the area, Fork Union has a prep program, postgraduate program. That's where Corin Cutler Turtle went for half a year before went to Virginia. I'll be going there, attending their camp, and actually Virginia coaches will actually be attending that camp as well. So I'll get information there. So those are the type of content that will be expected in the next few weeks.
I'm looking forward to that as well. So before we close out, let's talk about what's next. Of course, like we said before, the spring game's on the way. It's coming quick. In your opinion, professional opinion, Jacquie, what's next for this program on the recruiting front? It's looking good at some points, but it's also thin. Is it too early to ask you for somewhat of a grade for 2023 class? Kind of give me an idea. Tell me what you think.
So it's a little hard for me to grade the 23 class. Honestly, like I think the transfers made it into a B because
Mm,
I think the transfers filled on a little bit of the holes that they needed. Honestly, the defensive recruits they picked up in the final weeks of right before signing day, those defensive linemen out of Florida, I think that was a great haul. I think that made the class, to be honest with you. I think those
mm-hmm.
guys, those commitments, the kids out of Florida were some of the sleepers in that area, and the kids out of Georgia, to be fair too. I think Virginia is doing an excellent job of going into Florida and Georgia, two hotbed areas of talent where everyone likes to
Mm-hmm.
recruit. But that's the thing, everyone's recruiting those powerhouse programs, and there's always kids in there that get ignored or are slept on. Those are the kids Virginia should go after, which they did,
It's
which was
like that
very smart.
spillover, getting the spillover,
Exactly. You
Yeah.
go in there and you get those guys that aren't getting fought over by all these programs. Those are
Mm-hmm.
the kids that are left behind. Sometimes those are the kids that develop into very great college players in years 3 and 4 once they get into a strength program and get into that development. So Virginia did a good job there. I thought they needed to recruit a little bit better in state. I know a lot of people are like, well, they recruited a lot of good guys in state. I'm like, yes, But my thing is, I think when they first got into the position, they didn't really understand what it took to recruit to Virginia. I think they had an
Mm-hmm.
idea of what it took to recruit Virginia. Like they knew about the academics, they knew that. But I think they went after. So I always think there's like a couple levels of high school recruits, and they aim for a couple of their resources to be placed in some areas where Virginia did not have a shot in landing the recruit. I'm saying that that's great that you go for after those kids, but you ignored some other kids in other areas where I think they could have actually made a dent in that recruitment. And when they went back and tried, it was too late. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the area I want to see them improve this year is try to you don't have limitless resources in a recruiting office that you did in Clemson. So I think that
Right.
was a learning curve. And knowing that because you're limit in your resources, you need to adequate those resources accordingly to a couple of guys that you have better chance at. I know it's that pretty shiny 5-star might be something that you want. It's maybe something that you might be able to get in Clemson. To be fair, Mike London has shown that you're able to get 5 stars in Virginia, but it also has a different age in college football too. So it's
Yeah.
really hard to say like don't go after the 5 stars, but at the same time don't ignore those kids in your backyard where you're gonna go back and then sorry, too late, Virginia Tech, Duke, Pitt, all those other schools already
Mm-hmm.
been on there. And then you come in and then you have to fight with relationships that were built months before you get into the picture. So that is something that I think I want to see moving forward from Virginia. But for 23, this is for the second year in a row that I think they attacked the transfer portal pretty well, and
Mm-hmm.
they filled the gaps that they needed. But I think what I want them to do is to get those high schoolers that can really make an impact, not relatively early. I don't want them to play all freshmen here, but get guys that can by sophomore year, junior year can really make an effect, and that get
Contributing.
guys that will move the needle,
Mm-hmm.
create more buzz in the program. So get those guys early. I mean, if they can pick, if they can steal Christian Martin, I mean, this 24 class, if they can steal Christian Martin early or a quarterback early, that could really turn the tide for momentum in the state of Virginia.
Well, I can tell you, like you was talking about Coach London. Yeah, go after the 5 stars, but you got to backfill. You got to
Yeah,
backfill
which is where the whole wide net could like
That's
casting
right.
a wide net offer. So that's where we are, and I think they learned from last spring. Because again,
Mm-hmm.
that last spring was a lot about learning. They were already behind the 8 ball, and then they had to learn some heavy lessons. So I think that was where we kind of got delayed a little bit. But I think now they realize what they need to do, and you see that they've moved the needle with a couple of good in-state athletes. I mean, Christian Martin has visited Virginia a few times already. He camped at Virginia, got and then he came back for unofficial visit about a week later, got the offer, was back at Virginia during the fall, and he's back this weekend. So obviously they've done something right in how they're recruiting Christian Martin.
Well, I know that there's some coaches clinics coming up, some high school coaches clinics coming up for Coach Elliott, and I know that. Do you do any of the clinics at all, or do you
I
go
it
go
kind of
to the grounds at
depends.
all?
Kind of depends on the coaches clinics because they're right in the middle of not only spring football but also basketball season. So I'll be covering Virginia men's basketball, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that they'll make a longer run in March.
I think they
So
will. Hope they
I'll be
will.
yeah. So I'll be on the road for Virginia men's basketball. So I won't be able to kind of say I will be covering the coaches.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that'll be our next show. We'll start talking about UVA basketball, and we'll be able to catch up with you on that. But before we close, you got anything else you wanted to talk about? Anything how they can get a hold of you?
Sure, yeah. Well, obviously you can go on Wahoo's 24/7. You can subscribe there and we have, a lot of the recruiting updates. We always have a lot of pin posts of like that so you can tell when who's visiting when and what's going on there. We'll have updates on what the coaches are. You can find me on Twitter at @JacquieFran _ Jackie spelled differently at JACQUIE. You can also find our Wahoo's 24/7 YouTube channel and our podcast. Our good old podcast is also available wherever you listen to podcasts. So several different ways to get a hold.
And as promised, like I said, the top recruiter on the grounds, reporter on the grounds when it comes to recruiting, Miss Jacquie Franciulli. Thank you for coming on, Jacquie. And we want to thank you for making Locked On Virginia your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, everybody. We will be back down the road. And thank you, Jacquie, for coming on. This has been Locked On Virginia.